My daughter slid a glossy brochure across the lunch table like it was the dessert menu and asked me which room I thought I'd like best. Camille had already circled 2 of them in pen: garden view, extra charge. I looked at the pictures of strangers smiling in cardigans, and then I looked at my only daughter, and I understood that she had decided where the rest of my life would happen. She had picked the plates. She had picked the paint. She just needed me to sit still and be grateful. I did not cry. I have learned that a woman my age can smile the way a lake goes flat, nothing moving on top, everything moving underneath. So I picked up my coffee, terrible, and burnt the way I like it, and I let her keep talking. Because what Camille didn't know, sitting there so pleased with her circles and her garden view, was that the keys to the building she'd already promised to a developer were resting in my purse the whole time. And by the time the paperwork was done, the daughter who handed me a menu would be handed something too. If this already feels familiar, stay with me, because what I found out that week changed everything. My husband's name was Raymond, and for 41 years he carried more keys than any man needs. He was a building superintendent, and then, quietly, a man who bought the buildings. He'd find a tired brick duplex nobody wanted, fix the boiler himself, rent it fair, and hold on. People laughed at him a little. Raymond and his keys. He wore them on a brass ring worn smooth as a river stone, and every night he set them on the kitchen table with a sound I could find in my sleep. We lived small on purpose: 1 car, coupons, a porch. I sewed Camille's Easter dresses myself and told her they came from a catalogue so she wouldn't feel poor. Raymond used to say, "Loretta, we're not saving for us, we're saving for the people who come after us." I believed him, because he was the kind of man you could believe. And Camille, my Camille, was sweet once. She used to fall asleep in the crook of Raymond's arm on that porch while he named the constellations wrong on purpose, just to hear her correct him. She cried at animal commercials. She gave her mittens to a girl at the bus stop and walked home with red hands and never said a word about the cold. I don't know exactly when that girl left. I know it was after she married Dwight, after the bigger house, the leased cars, the vacations photographed more than they were lived. I watched my daughter learn to measure people by what they could do for her, and I told myself it was a phase the way you tell yourself the sky isn't really that dark yet. Raymond died on a Tuesday, in his chair, with the crossword half done and his keys in his lap. And, within a month, Camille began asking very gently, very lovingly, whether the house wasn't really just too much for one person now. The waitress at the diner that day was named Naomi. She was young, maybe 30, with tired eyes and a pen behind her ear, and she'd refilled my terrible coffee twice without being asked. She'd heard some of it you can't help but hear, in a booth like that, and after Camille kissed the air near my cheek and clicked out the door on her expensive heels, Naomi came and sat down across from me. Just for a minute. Just sat. "You okay, Miss Loretta?" She'd read my name off the loyalty card I'd handed her, and she said it like it mattered. I told her I was fine. That's the reflex. Fine. She didn't argue. She said her granddad had raised her, and when he got old, her aunties tried to do the same thing. Pick the place, pick the room, call it kindness. He wasn't confused, she said. He was just old and inconvenient, and there's a difference, and everybody in that family knew it, and nobody would say it out loud. She was in nursing school now, nights, because of him. Because somebody should look at old people like they're still in there. She topped off my cup one more time. "You don't look like a woman who needs a room picked out for her," she said. "You look like a woman working on a plan." I laughed for the first time in weeks. I hadn't had a plan, not yet. But the way that girl looked at me like I was a whole person and not a problem to be solved laid the first quiet brick of one under my feet. She never asked me for a thing. Not a bigger tip, not a story, nothing. That's how I knew, later, that she'd earned everything I would eventually give her. Before I left, she wrote her number on the back of my receipt, in case I ever needed a ride, or just wanted decent pie. "You're not a burden, Miss Loretta," she said. "Whatever they told you." I tucked that receipt into my purse, right next to Raymond's keys. 3 days later, I stopped by Camille's to return a dish I'd borrowed. That's the whole mundane truth of it. A casserole dish. Nothing more, and the front door was standing open. And I heard Dwight's voice coming from the study. He didn't hear me. Men his age never think an old woman moves quietly. We move quieter than anybody. We've had the practice. "No, the mother's not a problem," he was saying. "She's sharp on the surface, but she's 71, and she signs what Camille puts in front of her. Once she's placed, the whole Ashland portfolio's clean. 6 units and the corner lot I've got, Hartley ready to close the second we've got authority. Placed. Like a vase, like a bet." On the desk, in a folder that wasn't even hidden, was a letter of intent, Hartley Group Development. And under it, a printout of a form I didn't understand yet but would come to understand very well, a petition, with my name typed across the top, and a blank line where a judge would sign. I stood in that hallway holding a casserole dish, and I did not make a sound. I set the dish on the kitchen counter, and I let myself out the way I'd come. And I sat in my car in their driveway with Raymond's keys closed inside my fist, pressing the worn brass into my palm until it hurt, because the hurt was better than what I was actually feeling, which was nothing, a terrible, clarifying nothing. They weren't just going to move me out of my house. They were going to move me out of my own life, on paper, with a judge's blessing, and sell 41 years of Raymond's careful, patient work to a stranger before the man was cold in the ground a full year. Let me stop here for 1 second, because if you've made it this far, you already know this story in your bones. If you've ever been treated like a problem to be filed away by the very people you gave your whole life to do me one small kindness, tap that like button and subscribe so these stories keep finding the people who need them, and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? I read every single one. I mean that. I sit with my coffee and I read them, and I think about all of us out here, keeping our dignity in the quiet. Now, let me tell you what I did next. She came to me on Sunday, all warmth, and brought the good muffins. Camille arrives like weather. She swept in, kissed my cheek, straightened a picture that wasn't crooked, and told me she'd been so worried about you, Mama, rattling around this big house all alone. There it was, worried. She sat me down at my own kitchen table like a guest in my own life, and slid that brochure back out of her bag, the garden view one, and started talking about options, about how the stairs were really getting to be a lot. About the time I'd left the stove on last winter. One time, 3 years ago, and she'd been carrying it in her pocket like a coin ever since. "You're getting older, Mama," she said, so gently. "We just have to be realistic." Realistic. And honestly, the house, the buildings, it's too much for you. It's not good for you, carrying all that. Dwight and I can take it off your plate. You wouldn't have to think about any of it. Wouldn't that be a relief? Off my plate, as if Raymond's life's work were a chore I'd be grateful to be rid of. I watched her mouth make the shapes of love while her eyes did inventory. I watched her call me Mama in that soft, coaxing voice, and I remembered how, on that phone call in the study, Dwight had called me by my first name to a stranger, the mother, Loretta. She signs what Camille puts in front of her. In this house I was Mama, when they needed something. Out there I was Loretta, an obstacle with a birthday. "We're only trying to protect you," she said. Protect. I have lived long enough to know that when people tell you they're protecting you from your own life, they usually mean from your own choices, from your own money, from your own no. So I did the thing that has kept me safe for 71 years. I smiled. I said, "You've given me a lot to think about, baby." I let her believe she'd won a little ground. I let her leave the brochure on my table and kiss me goodbye and drive off feeling like a good daughter handling a hard thing. And then I sat in the quiet, with Raymond's keys in my hand, and her muffins going stale, and I let myself feel the whole shape of it at last. They hadn't just gotten greedy. They'd been watching me, studying me. Waiting the way you wait for fruit to soften for the day I'd be confused enough, tired enough, weak enough that a judge would agree I couldn't be trusted with my own name. I began to wonder how long they'd been waiting for me to get weak, and I decided, right there, that they were going to have to keep waiting. Raymond had a friend named Walter Boyd. They'd known each other 50 years, met over a disputed property line that turned into a chess rivalry, that turned into the kind of friendship men of that generation never quite named out loud. Walter was an estate attorney, mostly retired, and at Raymond's funeral he'd taken my hand and said, "Loretta, when you're ready, come see me." Raymond left instructions. Not just a will. Instructions. I hadn't been ready. Grief keeps its own calendar. I was ready now. Walter's office still smelled like law books and pipe smoke. He poured me coffee, somehow worse than the diners, and I loved him for it. And then he opened a folder and gently began to detonate my entire understanding of my own life. "Do you know what Raymond was worth?" he asked. I said we were comfortable. We had the house. The buildings brought in a little. Walter slid a paper across the desk. The Ashland buildings alone, the ones Camille was ready to sign over to Hartley, were appraised at just over $2 million, and they weren't the only ones. Raymond, my quiet man in his cardigan with his crossword, had spent 4 decades buying up tired little properties and never selling a single one. 11 doors, all told, plus the land. Plus accounts I'd never seen, inside a trust I hadn't known existed. The number Walter finally said out loud did not sound like it belonged to my life. I sat very still. I thought about the coupons, the Easter dresses I'd lied about, the one car, all those years. He didn't want it to change us, Walter said softly, as if he were reading it off my face. He watched money ruin his own brothers. He wanted to build something quiet and hand it to the people who stayed good. Then he gave me the letter. Raymond's handwriting. That careful, familiar slant. It wasn't long. He was never a long letter man. He wrote that he wasn't afraid of dying, only of what money does to people who've never had it, and that he'd built everything through a trust, so that no one could take it from me or twist it, no matter what they said about my mind or my age. "Read everything to Walter first," he wrote. "Don't sign a single thing alone." And then the line that stopped my breath. "I'm not worried about you, Loretta. You were always the strong one. I'm just worried about who might mistake your kindness for a door left open." He hadn't predicted anything. He couldn't have. He'd only worried, the way good men worry, in the general direction of the truth. And his worry had built me a fortress before I ever knew I'd need one. I laid my hand flat on that letter and closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I was not angry. That surprised me. I'd expected fury. Instead, I felt something colder and far more useful. "Walter," I said, "I don't want to punish anybody. I want to decide what's fair, not what's angry." The papers came 10 days later, served on my own porch by a young man who wouldn't meet my eyes. A petition for guardianship. Camille and Dwight asking a court to declare that I was no longer competent to manage my own affairs, my property, my money, my medical choices, and to appoint them, my loving family, to manage it all on my behalf. Attached was a list of my supposed lapses: the stove, 3 years back, a missed doctor's appointment. A day I'd seemed confused, which was the day after Raymond's funeral, the day I forgot what year felt like. They'd been collecting me, filing me away, one moment at a time, into a woman who couldn't be trusted with her own front door. That is a particular kind of cruelty, not a knife, a form, a quiet little form that, if a judge signed it, would erase me more completely than any nursing home ever could. I'd still be alive. I just wouldn't be allowed to be a person anymore. But here is what I learned, digging into the why of it, and it changed how I carried all of it. Walter made some calls. Dwight was drowning. The leased cars, the photographed vacations, a business that had folded quietly 2 years ago. They were 3 months from losing their own house. And Hartley, it turned out, had been circling the Ashland block for 2 years, waiting patiently for exactly this. An old widow, a grieving family, a moment of weakness to buy cheap. Dwight hadn't found the developer. The developer had found Dwight, and known just what kind of desperate man he was looking at. So the Hartley deal wasn't greed sitting on top of comfort. It was a drowning man grabbing the nearest solid thing, and the nearest solid thing was me, was Raymond's keys. Was the life we'd built with coupons so that our daughter would never have to drown. And Camille, my Camille, who once gave her mittens away in the cold, had chosen her husband's panic over her mother's dignity, and dressed it up in a garden view brochure so she'd never have to look straight at what it was. I understood it. Understanding is not the same as allowing. For a year I had been a widow, a soft, grieving, agreeable woman drifting through her house, touching her husband's things. That woman would have signed the brochure eventually. That woman was tired. The morning I read that petition, something in me went quiet, and level, and awake. I stopped grieving, and I started deciding. I went back to Walter, and across 3 careful afternoons, we built it. Not out of anger, out of arithmetic and love. Everything Raymond had built, the 11 doors, the land, the accounts I moved into a strengthened living trust, with Walter as trustee and myself in full control for as long as I drew breath. And on top of it, the piece that mattered most, Walter brought in a doctor and then a second one, and I sat for 2 full competency evaluations, answered every question, signed every finding. If anyone ever again wanted to argue that Loretta wasn't in her right mind, they would have to argue with an inch-thick stack of paper that said, in a physician's hand, that she was sharper than they were. Then I decided where the money would go. The bulk of it, most of everything, into a foundation in Raymond's name, to buy tired buildings in tired neighborhoods and rent them fair, forever. His whole philosophy, made permanent. Quiet, patient, good. A protected share, in trust, for my grandson Eli, untouchable by his parents until he was grown, because a child should never pay for what his father did in a panic. A real gift, outright, for Naomi from the diner, enough to finish nursing school without working nights. Because a woman who looks at old people like they're still in there should never have to choose between her calling and her rent. She had never asked me for a thing. And for Camille, not nothing. Never nothing. A single conditional gift, held in escrow, with terms. A door she could walk through only if she chose to become someone who could be trusted with a key again. It was Eli who tipped the last domino. He'd come to me the week before, 16 and hollow-eyed, and played me a voice memo off his phone, his father, at the dinner table, saying the word placed. He didn't tell me what to do with it. "I just didn't want you thinking you were crazy, Grandma," he said. "You're not crazy. They're scared, and it's making them ugly." Then he asked me not to let it make me ugly too. I promised him it wouldn't. And on a bright Thursday morning, with Walter and 2 witnesses watching, I picked up Raymond's fountain pen, the one from his desk, the one he'd signed every honest deed with, and I wrote my name, slow and sure, across every last page. Camille found out I'd been to see a lawyer. Of course she did. Small towns, and smaller loyalties. She came to the house without the muffins this time. The warmth was gone. She stood in my living room with Dwight hovering behind her like a shadow that had learned to wear a golf shirt, and she told me sadly, so sadly that they'd hoped it wouldn't come to this. "The hearing is set, Mama," she said, "the guardianship hearing. And I have to be honest with you, the things people have noticed, the confusion, the poor decisions, this sudden business with attorneys and changing everything, it doesn't look good. It looks exactly like a woman who isn't well being taken advantage of." She let that settle. "If you fight us, It's going to get ugly. Doctors. Questions. People going through your whole life. Do you really want that? At your age? Then Dwight spoke. He didn't call me Mama. He never had. Be smart, Loretta, he said. Sign the placement voluntarily, and we keep this quiet and dignified. Fight it, and things could get very messy. For everybody. I looked at this man, standing in my husband's house, threatening to have me declared insane if I refused to hand him my husband's keys. And God help me, I felt almost sorry for him, because he had no idea. He thought he was holding a loaded gun. He didn't know I'd already emptied it 10 days ago, in a doctor's office, twice, on the record. You're right, Dwight, I said quietly. Things could get very messy. I let him hear the agreement and miss everything underneath it. So let's not keep it quiet, I said. Let's do it in front of everybody. Let's let the whole family hear the truth in one room. I'll host. Sunday. Bring whoever you like. Camille blinked. She'd come expecting tears. She'd come expecting surrender. She had no idea she'd just accepted an invitation to her own reckoning. They came on Sunday in their good clothes, ready to manage a fragile old woman in front of the family. They found the family already seated. My sister, 2 cousins, Eli in the corner, watching his parents with a stillness no child should ever have to learn, and a stranger in a dark suit at the head of my table, a leather folder squared in front of him. Everyone, I said. This is Walter Boyd. He was Raymond's dearest friend, and he's my attorney. I asked him here because Camille and Dwight have some concerns about my mind, and I thought the whole family should hear them settled properly. Camille's smile flickered. Mama, this is exactly the kind of confusion we— Walter, I said, please. Walter opened the folder, and one calm page at a time, he took their whole plan apart. First, the competency evaluations. 2 of them. 2 physicians, independently, on the record, finding me of entirely sound mind, dated before Camille ever filed a thing. Any guardianship petition, Walter said mildly, would not survive first contact with these documents. It would, frankly, invite a hard look at who filed it, and why. Dwight's jaw worked. The gun in his hand had turned to water. Then, Walter explained the trust. Slowly, in plain words, for the whole room, that everything Raymond built had sat inside a protected trust for years. That Camille had never owned the Ashland buildings, could never have sold them, and that the letter of intent she'd signed with the Hartley Group was worth precisely the paper it was printed on. At the name Hartley, a man I had never introduced the developer's associate, whom Dwight had quietly invited, hoping to close in the same room, rose from his chair, gathered his coat, and walked out without a single word. The deal leaving on its own 2 legs, the way it had come. Then, Walter read the will. The foundation in Raymond's name. The protected trust for Eli, sealed away from his parents' reach. And an outright gift, free and clear, to a young woman named Naomi, who had shown a stranger simple kindness on a hard afternoon and asked for nothing in return. That gift is not negotiable, and it is not reversible, Walter said, and closed the folder. It belongs to her. The room was very quiet. Camille's mask came off in pieces, first the hurt daughter face. Then something younger and more frightened underneath the girl who'd married a drowning man and let him pull her down. You're doing this to punish me, she whispered. No, baby, I said. I'm doing this because you handed me a menu. And it was Eli, 16, shaking, brave, who said the truest thing in the room. Mom, he said, you tried to have Grandma locked away so Dad wouldn't lose the house. I heard you. I heard both of you. He wasn't accusing. He was grieving. Why couldn't you just love her? Nobody had an answer for that. There isn't one. I stood then. I walked around my own table to my daughter, and I lifted Raymond's brass keyring out of my purse, the sound of it. the sound I could find in my sleep, and I set one single key down on the table in front of her. Apartment 2B, one small, honest unit in the corner building, the one thing held in escrow for her. Conditional, with terms she would have to earn her way through, one honest day at a time. You handed me the keys to a room you'd chosen, so you could put me away, I said. So I'm handing you keys too, to one door. It's the only thing in all of this that can ever be yours, and only if you become someone I can trust with a lock again. I folded her fingers around it, gently. The keys don't make it yours, Camille. Living right does. It fell apart the way these things do, not with a bang, but with a slow, humiliating unraveling. The Hartley deal was dead. Without it, Dwight's arithmetic collapsed. Within 4 months, they lost the big house with the photographed rooms. The leased cars went back. I heard, through my sister, that Dwight moved out that winter, that whatever had held their marriage together had been made of money, and the money was gone. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that, because people expect the wronged to feel a kind of joy when the wrongdoer falls, and I felt none of it. I felt tired. I felt sad, in a deep, old, aching place. And there, in the quiet after it was finally over, the old wound turned over one last time and showed me its true face. All my life I had been managed. A good girl, then a good wife, then a good widow. Useful, agreeable, counted on. And I had told myself that being needed was the same as being loved. It wasn't. My own daughter had looked at me and seen a signature, a set of keys, an inconvenience with a pension, and the cruelest part wasn't her greed. It was how easy I had made it, all those years, to be treated as a thing that provides, rather than a person who is. I felt that all the way down now. And I promised the woman I'd become that she would never again mistake her own usefulness for her worth. Camille called me, finally. Late. Never to say I miss you. Never that. We need to talk, Mama. We need to figure this out. Need. Always need. I let it ring. And when I finally called her back, days later, on my own terms, I said the truest thing I know. Camille, I forgive you. I do. I'm your mother, and I always will be. But forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. One I can hand you for free. The other you have to earn back slow, over years, with your actions and not your words. She was quiet a long time. I forgive you, I said again, but I will not hand you control of my life. 1 year later, the Raymond Boyd Foundation Walter insisted we use both their names. Owns 14 buildings now. 14 doors, rented fair to people the market had forgotten. There's a plaque in the lobby of the first one, small and brass, that says only, built quiet, held good. Naomi finished nursing school in the spring. She works days now, on a geriatric floor, where she looks at every frightened old face like there's a whole person still living inside it, because there is. She calls me every Sunday. She brings pie. In a full year, she has never once asked me for anything, which is exactly why I'd give her the world. Eli lives with me half the week now. His mother agreed to it, one of the few good decisions she's made, because her boy needed the steadiness of his grandmother's porch. He does his homework at Raymond's desk. Sometimes he picks up the brass keyring just to hear it, and I let him, because one day those keys, and everything they stand for, will be his to carry honestly. My table is full again on Sundays. My sister, the cousins, Naomi and her young man, Eli, a widower down the street named Gerald who makes terrible coffee I've grown to love. Nobody at that table is invisible. Nobody there is measuring anybody by what they can provide. We are simply people who stayed good, eating together, the way Raymond always wanted. Last month, a new woman moved into 4C, in the Ashland Building 81, alone, her own children scattered and silent. I brought her a casserole. I sat with her while she cried about feeling like a burden. You're not a burden, I told her, and topped off her terrible coffee. Whatever they told you. I said it the way Naomi once said it to me. Someone cared for, now, the way I once was. Camille wrote me a letter this fall, by hand. Her handwriting has Raymond's same careful slant, and it broke something open in me to see it. She didn't ask for money. That's how I knew it was real. She wrote that she was in counseling, that she'd taken a job, real hours, honest ones. That she understood. Now she'd tried to erase me because it was easier than facing what she and Dwight had let themselves become. And that she was sorry not for getting caught, but for who she'd allowed herself to be. She's been living in apartment 2B for 3 months. She pays her rent on time. We have lunch once a week, at the diner. Naomi always saves us the good booth. We are not what we were. Maybe we never will be. But she's earning her way back to the key, one honest Sunday at a time, and that door opens a little wider each week. Here's what a long life taught me. Love without boundaries becomes permission. Being agreeable to keep the peace is not the same as being at peace. And justice doesn't always shout, sometimes it just quietly rewrites the last page, hands the people who forgot you a single key, and lets them learn, too late to argue, what it was really worth. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your own self-respect? Tell me below. I read every word. If this story reached something in you, give it a like, subscribe so the next one finds you, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it is never, ever too late to begin again. And tell me, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? I'll be here. The coffee's on.